Part 34. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 331. Chapter 331 Losing the Memory of a Day. Sun Gro hadn't realized that something was wrong with Suleun, so she wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes. "Mom, it's okay, just wake up." Suleun was confused. "Mom, didn't I just take a nap?" This sentence made Sun Gro stunned. At this moment she felt something strange. She took Suleun's hand and asked cautiously, "Yunur, don't you remember?" "What should I remember?" Suleun frowned, wondering if she had forgotten something. "But it seems not. Just some inexplicable fear emerged in my heart." She reached out and pressed her forehead. Suddenly, she noticed her bandaged left wrist. When was her hand injured? Did she really forget something? "Mom, how's Yunur doing?" Suya said as he walked into the house. When he saw Suleun waking up, he hurriedly stepped forward. "Yunur, what happened to you last night?" "Last night?" In Suleun's memory, she went to bed very early last night. Suddenly, she thought of something and looked at Sun Gro and Suya. "Mom, brother, did I miss my uncle's wedding?" Sun Gro and Suya looked at each other and understood. Suya said, "Yunur, uncle's wedding happened yesterday." "How is that possible?" Suleun didn't have any memory of the wedding in her mind. She originally thought that Sun Gro was joking with Suya, but when she saw the serious expressions on their faces, she became unsure. "Yesterday was really my uncle's wedding." Suya nodded. By coincidence, Sun Changping and Zhang Susu also arrived at this time. Suleun was in a trance when he saw the two people being intimate. Because she had to avoid suspicion before marriage, and Zhang Susu had to leave from the Qin family, in Suleun's memory, Zhang Susu had already moved into the Qin family 2 days ago. Even if it was just to make a joke for her, it would not bring the person back. What's more, her injured wrist is a piece of evidence. Suleun vaguely understood that she seemed to have lost her memory for a day. She rubbed the corners of her eyes and said, "Mom, let the doctor come and take a look." It is not a normal thing to lose the memory of a day inexplicably. Suleun looked calm, but her heart was still lifted. She had a feeling that the lost memory of this day should be very important. "What happened yesterday?" She calmed down and asked everyone. Under Sun Gro and Suye's explanation, Suleun knew what happened yesterday, but she still didn't have any memory in her mind. Yesterday after the wedding banquet was over, she and Liangxin Kuilai were on their way back to Keahuaziazu when they were knocked unconscious by someone. Liangxin and Kuilai woke up and found that she was missing, and immediately informed Suya and others. Suya took people out to search, but found nothing. It was not until more than 2 hours later that she was found in a street. No one passes that street on weekdays, and no one goes in or out at night, so no one knows how she appeared. When she was found, her wrists were tied with gauze. Suya later took her back to the Sun mansion. The doctor looked at the wound again and said it was a cut, and that's when she woke up. "Yunur, do you have any impression?" Suya finished speaking and asked. Suleun shook his head. "I can't remember it at all." It was as if she had never experienced it at all. The doctor has arrived and checked Suleun's pulse, but there was no problem at all from the pulse condition. Even Suleun tried it himself and couldn't see the problem. Suleun noticed Sun Gro's solemn expression, took her arm and comforted her. "Mom, it's just a day's matter. If you forget it, just forget it. My health is not serious, you don't have to worry so much. But, the person who took you away has not yet been found. Just keep me and my brother busy with this matter, so don't think about it." Suleun glanced at Suya, who reacted and said, "Mom, don't worry, I will definitely find that person. Yunur, if you feel uncomfortable in any way, you must remember to tell me." Sun Gro sighed. Soleun smiled and nodded, I will. Besides, mother, don't forget, I am a doctor myself. If there is really a problem, I will definitely notice it. Sun Gro also knew that these were words of comfort. She patted Soleun's hand, feeling secretly vigilant. It seems that it would be better to arrange more manpower around Yunur. When everyone left, Soleun called over Lian Xian and Kui Lu. As soon as the two of them arrived in front of Soleun, they immediately knelt down. Please punish me, miss. Everyone, get up. This incident cannot be blamed on Lian Xian and Kui Lu. She should have a sachet on her body, so she couldn't resist it, let alone Lian Xian and Kui Lu. Did you notice any abnormalities before you fell into coma? Liang Xin and Qiao stood up, looked at each other, then looked at Soleun, and shook their heads. Qiao said, my slave fainted later than Lian Xian, but it only took a moment. But before I fainted, I saw that you were still standing, miss. Soleun looked down and saw the clothes on his body. Have the clothes I changed been washed? Lian Xian replied, these are the clothes that my servant changed for the young lady. I haven't had time to wash them yet. Bring me the clothes and the sachet I have with me. Are you here? Everyone is here, my servant will go get it right away. Lian Xian hurried out of the house, and soon came back with clothes and a sachet. Soleun first took the sachet and inspected it carefully. Although she didn't remember what happened last night, if she was drugged, there would be traces on the sachet. As expected, the medicinal powder inside the sachet has changed. Soleun took out the medicinal powder inside. The powder turned from gray-white to purple. Put it in the study for me first. Subsequently, Soleun pulled off his clothes and began to inspect them. But apart from dirt, there were no other traces on the clothes. Soleun took a slight sniff of the smell on his clothes. It was a very light fragrance and not recognizable at all. Other than the discolored medicinal powder, there are no other clues for the time being. Miss, please rest first. Qiao noticed Soleun's expression gradually becoming ugly and persuaded him. Soleun nodded, don't wash these clothes yet. I'll take a look at them later. This slave understands. Qiao took the clothes and walked out of the house, then closed the door so that Soleun could rest peacefully. Soleun slowly lay down and rubbed the gauze on his wrist. Where did this injury come from? The movement of her hand was a little heavier, pressing on the wound. The stinging feeling became more and more obvious, and the thoughts in Soleun's mind began to surge. The heart is beating faster and faster, as if to indicate something. Slowly, however, the beating speed of her heart weakened. Soleun was lying on the bed. She didn't realize that her eyes were gradually blurring at this time. Soleun blinked her eyes and the confusion dissipated. She didn't feel at all that something was wrong with her just now. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 332. Chapter 332 Grandma goes out. After resting for most of the day, Soleun got up from the bed. Maybe he had been lying there for a long time. When he just got out of bed, Soleun still felt a little dizzy. Miss, do you want to get something? As soon as Lian Xian entered the room, she saw Soleun getting off the bed and hurried over. Soleun waved her hand and did not let Lian Xian support her. She just injured her wrist and there was nothing wrong with her elsewhere. I'm going to the study. Having had enough rest, she now wants to investigate yesterday's events as soon as possible. Although the Sun Mansion is not as good as the royal palace, it is also guarded by soldiers. The fact that she was kidnapped from the Sun Mansion is a bit weird no matter how you think about it. Lian Xian, please ask someone to invite my brother over. My slave will go right away. Soleun arrived at the study. The powder was carefully packed by Lian Xian and placed on the table. Sulayun took the small bottle filled with medicinal powder and poured out a little powder for processing. Different intoxicating drugs have been recorded in medical books. Except for some unique intoxicating drugs, the rest of the intoxicating drugs generally do not have many differences. There are many tools and materials prepared by Sulayun in the study room, so when Suya arrived, Sulayun had already investigated the cause of the change in the medicinal powder. Yunur. Suya saw Sulayun's solemn expression as soon as he entered the room. Subconsciously asked, "Are you feeling uncomfortable somewhere?" Sulayun shook his head and put down the things in his hands. "Brother, I suspect that someone in the army has been bribed. I've asked someone to investigate." Suya could not have imagined anything Sulayun could think of. After leaving Kayahuazayazu in the morning, he asked someone to investigate. "What did you find out?" "The drug the other party used was rosemary." She had also smelled this kind of intoxicating drug when she was in the palace. Logically speaking, if it was rosemary, she should be able to react. "I am afraid that the other party has added something to the rosemary and made some changes. If it hadn't reacted with the medicinal powder she put in the sachet, I'm afraid if I checked again today, I'd find nothing." Sulayun frowned and found rosemary. She immediately thought of the 13th prince. "Brother, have you heard anything happened in the palace recently? The last time concubine Shu had a miscarriage, there was no news outside the palace. It seems that the matter was suppressed within the palace. It's just that she doesn't know the situation of concubine Chin. More than half a month has passed now, and I don't know what's going on." Suya thought for a while, shook his head and replied, "Probably not, but I just came back from Yangzhou, so I don't know if I'm afraid of anything." "Brother, then do it for me." "Cousin." As soon as Sulayun's words left his mouth, Xiang Lingling's voice sounded immediately after him. The sound was a bit far away, as if it was coming from the courtyard gate. After a while, Xiang Lingling's figure appeared in front of the study. "Cousin, cousin, you are all here." The matter of Sulayun's disappearance did not spread, and Mrs. Yang and Xiang Lingling did not know about it. "What's wrong?" Sulayun paused for a moment and did not continue. Instead, he looked at Xiang Lingling and asked. Xiang Lingling didn't notice the atmosphere in the study and said with a smile, "Grandma said she wanted to go out, so she asked me to call you all together. My aunt wants to go out, my mother seems to have never mentioned this." Sulayun was a little surprised. My aunt had not been out in the past few days, so why did my uncle want to go out as soon as the wedding was over? But since my great aunt is willing, it's certainly not easy for them as juniors to refuse. Xiang Lingling shook her head, "I don't know about that. She only found out after lunch when her grandmother mentioned that she wanted to go out. I'm afraid it's inconvenient today." Suya thought of the injury on Sulayun's wrist. Even if he had to go out, it wouldn't be today. Xiang Lingling didn't know what Suya was thinking, so she asked doubtfully, "Cousin, is there any inconvenience?" Sulayun raised his hand to reveal his wrist. "I accidentally hurt my hand yesterday." "Why are you injured?" Xiang Lingling was shocked when she saw Sulayun's wrist. He was still wrapped in gauze, and the injury was obviously serious. "Small accident. Then I'll go back and tell my grandmother." After saying that, Xiang Lingling stood up and left. In Chaeyun Pavilion, when he learned that Sulayun was injured and couldn't go out, he said to the old lady calmly, "Since it's inconvenient for her, just don't take her with you." "Ah!" Xiang Lingling was stunned. Seeing the confused Xiang Lingling, Mrs. Yang felt helpless in her eyes. "Please ask your cousin Suya to accompany us." "Grandma, are there just the three of us? You don't want to go out with your grandma either?" "No, no." Xiang Lingling quickly shook her head, with a smile on her face when she went out. "You can go out with cousin Suya again." Xiang insisted on going out to the old lady, so Suya naturally wanted to accompany her. In front of the gate of Sun Mansion, the carriage has been parked. Mrs. Siang went out with the help of Siang Lingling. Grandma. Suye stretched out his hand to help Mrs. Siang onto the carriage, and then pulled Siang Lingling onto the carriage. He himself was sitting on the horse in front. The old lady is going to Tianbao temple. Suye sat on the horse, but he was muttering in his heart. He has followed his grandfather Sun Shao since he was a child, and has heard a lot about his grandmother. It seems that his sister does not believe in any Buddhism and never goes to temples. Perhaps there are some changes as I get older. Suye didn't think much about it. But in the carriage, Siang Lingling looked puzzled. Grandma, why do you want to go to Tianbao temple? That's a temple. Is it possible that I can't go? Looking at the old lady and Siang Lingling, her tone was calm. But when you were at home, didn't you say these were false? Siang Lingling blinked. Every time her mother went to the temple to pray for blessings, her grandmother would say this. The two of them often had disputes over such things. Unexpectedly, my grandmother changed once she came to the capital. When you get to the place, don't say anything you shouldn't say. After speaking to the old lady, he closed his eyes and rested. Siang Lingling was confused and didn't understand what her grandmother meant. Tianbao temple has arrived. Mrs. Siang got off the carriage and was helped by Siang Lingling to walk inside. Suye took the people to park the carriage first. There were several carriages parked nearby. Suye glanced out of the corner of his eye and saw a familiar carriage. It is the carriage of the Su family. He frowned slightly. The Su family also came. Enter Tianbao temple. Before seeing Mrs. Siang and Siang Lingling, I noticed Mrs. Su's figure first. The people in front of Mrs. Su were none other than Mrs. Siang and Siang Lingling. The two old ladies said a few words and both laughed. On the other hand, Siang Lingling beside her didn't know what kind of expression to show. What is grandma doing? Cousin. Lu Shuiying saw Suye coming over, with a smile on her face. She ran forward and was about to say something when Suye walked past her and went straight to the old lady. Mrs. Su. Suye nodded towards Mrs. Su. Mrs. Su's eyes flashed and she said, yeah, when you have time, please bring Yunur back to see grandma. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 333. Chapter 333 The Smartest One. Mrs. Su's words were very sincere, almost pleading. Suye noticed that several eyes fell on him. There were some ladies from other families in the main hall, and Suye had already noticed him as soon as he entered. Now that I heard Mrs. Su's words again, I focused my attention even more. This can be regarded as the closest encounter between the two families since the in-law relationship between the Sun and Su families was severed. What's more, Mrs. Su is still an elder. When she says this, people can't help but think about her. Suye's face was cold, but his etiquette was very thorough. I will visit you when I have time. But he didn't mention Suleun. He knew in his heart that Yunur probably didn't want to see Mrs. Su. As for him going to Su's house, it doesn't matter. There are still clouds. Mrs. Su did not skip this topic and insisted on asking Suleun. Suye's tone became lighter. Yunur is not here, so I can't answer for her. Oh, I also know that girl Yunur is probably angry with me. Mrs. Su's eyes naturally turned red, but my grandmother only found out about this later. Mrs. Su, if you have nothing else to do, we will leave first. Suye did not intend to continue listening, but Mrs. Siang was very interested. Old sister, I knew about this too late, otherwise I would have tried to persuade Gro. Open your mouth to the old lady to receive it. At this time, Suye came back to his senses. He thought Mrs. Siang met Mrs. Su by chance, but now it seemed that the two had made an appointment early in the morning. Fortunately, my sister and mother didn't come, otherwise I might have been laughed at by the two people in front of me. Suye's eyes were filled with chills, and he looked coldly at the pretentious gestures of the two people in front of him. Xiang Lingling took a few steps behind him, pursed her lips and didn't know what to say. She didn't know that her grandmother would do something like this. She came in with her grandmother earlier and saw two people walking towards her. She didn't know Mrs. Su, so when she heard her grandmother call her old sister, she was confused. But grandma asked her to call Mrs. Su, and something flashed through Xiang Lingling's mind. As the conversation between the two old men continued, Xiang Lingling fully understood, and it was precisely because of this that she froze on the spot. Cousin, grandma, she. Cousin, you don't even know what those three people did in the Su family. Lu Shuiying interrupted Xiang Lingling. She moved closer to Suye and reached out to pull him, but was avoided. Suye took a step back and said coldly, "It has nothing to do with me. What those three people want to do has nothing to do with him or the Sun family." Lu Shuiying did not expect that she would be rejected so simply, and the expression on her face froze. Her extended hand also stopped in mid-air. Xiang Lingling originally felt embarrassed, but seeing Lu Shuiying's appearance, she no longer felt embarrassed. Mrs. Su and Mrs. Yang got excited about chatting and found a side room to sit down. Suye stood outside the door, listening to the conversation between the two people in the room, his brows furrowed and never loosened. Half an hour passed, and the two old ladies came out of the side room. "I'll go visit my old sister at home in a few days." Joking to the old lady. Mrs. Su also had a smile on her face. "Okay, if you're not free, I can go there." The two parted reluctantly, and those who didn't know thought they were good sisters who hadn't seen each other for a long time. On the way back to Sun Mansion, the atmosphere was dull both outside and in the carriage. "Grandma, that's Mrs. Su. Could it be someone else?" Looking at the old lady's granddaughter, you can figure out what she is thinking. "How do you feel about it, Suye?" "Grandma, my cousin and I have only known each other for a long time." Xiang Lingling blushed slightly. She knew one thing before coming to the capital. Both her grandmother and mother intended for her to get engaged to Suye. So she asked a lot about Suye on the way here, but it wasn't until the moment she saw Suye that she knew what it meant to hear 100 words once. There is no girl who is not pregnant, let alone a man like Suye. How could Xiang Lingling not be moved? Can grandma still know your thoughts? If you want to be with Suye, just do as grandma says. Sent to the old lady in a deep voice. He pursed his lower lip towards Lingling and asked, "Grandma, what do you mean by this? You are the smartest among the sisters, otherwise grandma wouldn't have brought you to the capital, right?" The carriage became quiet. For a long time, I could only hear the word Arrived at Sun Mansion, Suye looked back at the carriage, handed the reins to the boy beside him, and walked straight in. When Mrs. Yang got out of the carriage, she only saw Suye's back and didn't care. Jiawen. Sun Gro stood in the courtyard, with servants coming and going, putting various exquisite porcelains into wooden boxes. "Mother." Suye entered the courtyard. "I have something to tell you." "What's wrong?" Sun Gro noticed Suye's cold expression, took his hand and went into the house. "Do you know what happened to my great-aunt when she went out today?" "Your great-aunt told me about this before. Did you accompany me?" "My great-aunt went to Tianbao Temple." Sun Gro was stunned. "Auntie, she doesn't seem to like going to these places. She went to see Mrs. Su." As soon as these words came out, Grandma Li, who had just walked in from the door, paused, quickly closed the door, and walked to Sun Gro. After a while, Sun Gro realized who Mrs. Suye was talking about. Her brows gradually wrinkled. Why did Aunt go to see her? Suya told Sun Jiaro everything that happened in Tianbao Temple. The more the latter listened, the uglier his face became. You don't have to worry about this, I will talk to my aunt. Sun Jiaro knew that Suya had to do a lot recently and didn't want him to bother with such things anymore. Suya shook his head, Mom, I'm afraid it's not enough for you to come forward to deal with this matter. It's up to Grandpa to talk about it. Mrs. Yang did not mean to hide her behavior at all. Even if Sun Jiaro tried to tell her, it would not help. I am afraid that Mrs. Yang would still use it to give some advice. He didn't want his mother to be troubled by the Su family's affairs anymore. What you said makes sense, but I'd better tell my aunt first and then we'll see what happens. Sun Jiaro did not intend to delay, and after letting Suye go back, she went to Chaeyun Pavilion. Old Madame Xiang seemed to have expected that she would come, and had already had tea prepared. Aunt. Sun Jiaro stepped into the house and sat on the main seat facing the old lady. That face similar to her mother always made Sun Jiaro fascinated in the past, but today she had a different feeling. Even if she looks like her mother, this aunt is not her mother after all. Sun Jiaro suppressed the faint trace of nostalgia in her eyes and walked to the edge of her seat to sit down. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, Past and Present. Chapter 334. Chapter 334 You Can't Control It. Xiang saw the old lady. Sun Jiaro's face was calm, but her eyes were slightly turbulent. She thought that based on Sun Jiaro's attitude when she left, she should be questioning her now. Unexpectedly, Sun Jiaro was calmer than he thought. Jiaro, what's the matter with you coming? Things were a little different from what she thought, so she couldn't help but speak to the old lady first. At this point, she realized that her words were not at the right time. Sun Jiaro's eyebrows were calm, and, I don't want to hide you anymore. Why did you go to Tianbao Temple today? After the words fell, she looked at the old lady with sharp eyes. He spoke to the old lady and replied, praying to God and worshipping Buddha is nothing more than this. My mother always told me about my aunt in the past, saying that she didn't like it. I didn't expect that after so many years of not seeing her, my aunt has changed. People will always change. Old Madame Xiang was a little unsure of what Sun Jiaro meant. She stared at Sun Jiaro's face for a long time, not angry or dissatisfied, as if she just asked a few questions casually. But this shouldn't be the case. Jiaro, let me tell you nothing from my aunt. I went to Tianbao Temple today and saw someone who was an acquaintance of yours. Mrs. Yang didn't want to miss this opportunity, so she had to mention the matter of Tianbao Temple herself first. Sun Jiaro said softly, which lady did your aunt see? That old lady from the Su family, your mother-in-law. Xiang glanced at Sun Jiaro at the old lady and continued, after meeting, my aunt felt that she got along well with her. If your mother was still alive, she should be able to get along well with her. Hearing the mention of his mother to the old lady, Sun Jiaro's face changed slightly. She still remembered their seniority and calmed down. Auntie, if you get along well with Mrs. Su, you can spend more time with Mrs. Su. You do not mind. He narrowed his eyes at the old lady and stared at Sun Jiaro. Sun Jiaro's expression was natural, why should I mind? This is your own business, aunt. As a junior, how can Jiaro have any opinions? Forget it. Xiang Madam suddenly sneered, if I really join Madame Su, I'm afraid I still don't know what others will say about me. When she said this, she paid attention to Sun Jiaro out of the corner of her eye, as if she wanted to see some expected reaction. But Sun Jiaro did not speak according to her thoughts at all. My aunt is right. The current relationship between the Sun family and the Su family is indeed not suitable. If my aunt is really bored at home, I will arrange for my aunt to meet some old ladies from other families. After Sun Jiaro said that, she looked specifically at Grandmali and said again, asking Grandma Li to make arrangements. Mrs. Yang's expression turned ugly. "Gro, it's not that auntie should be nosy, but your mother can't control you, so auntie should say more. You have been together for more than 20 years, don't you have no feelings at all?" "Aunt, what do you mean?" Sun Gro did not refute directly. She felt that something was wrong to the old lady, but she still couldn't help but said, "Then are you going to give up the title of the Marquis Mansion? Yair has achieved military success now, is he lacking a title?" "That's not what I said." Xiang frowned at the old lady, intending to mention a few words to Sun Gro. Sun Gro stood up and said, "Aunt, you are my mother's sister. The word aunt is my respect for you, but my marriage or matters with the Su family are not your responsibility. Your surname is not Su. Let alone son, if you want to do something outside, I, as a junior, cannot control it, but if you want to involve the Sun family and my 2 children, then you have to think carefully." "Hey, you kid, how do you talk?" Mrs. Yang's eyes widened. She never imagined that Sun Gro could say such a thing. "It seems I have to talk to your father. What do you want to say to me?" Sun Xiao's voice came from outside the house. He looked towards the old lady and Sun Gro, and saw Sun Xiao walking straight into the house. "Dad." Although Sun Gro was wondering why her father was here, she didn't show it on her face. She knew her father was on her side. Sun Xiao threw the letter he had on the table. "You are Yuzhen's sister, but that doesn't mean you can take care of me and Yuzhen's daughter." When she saw the letter, Mrs. Yang's expression froze. This is the letter she had someone send to the Su family after she came back today. Now it's in Sun Xiao's hands, and he hasn't even opened it, fearing that he won't be able to send it out. Seeing the letter and then looking at the old lady's face, Sun Gro didn't understand. The family did not care about Mrs. Yang's actions before, and did not know when she had contact with the Su family. But if something happened today, people would naturally pay attention to it. "Brother-in-law, I also regard Gro as my daughter, that's why I think about her so much, don't worry too much. If you really regard Gro as your daughter, why do you want to push her into the fire pit again?" Sun Xiao's expression was serious, and he unconsciously took on a bit of the aura he had on the battlefield in the past, which startled Mrs. Yang. He breathed out to the old lady and tried to control his expression. "I didn't mean this, let alone the Su family. Okay, you don't need to mention this matter again, let alone talk about it in front of Yair and Yunur. Changping's wedding has been completed. In a few days, they will get up to pay homage to Susu's parents, so it would be nice to stop by. I will let Changping take you back to Yuncheng." This. Before Mrs. Yang could even speak, she was stopped by Sun Xiao's cold eyes. She frowned and watched Sun Xiao and Sun Gro leave. This father and daughter are equally stubborn. Then the Su family is good, I'm afraid they don't know it yet. He narrowed his eyes at the old lady, and from the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of Xiang Lingling peeking in the corner, and waved to her. Xiang Lingling stepped forward timidly, her face no longer as bright as before. "Have you remembered everything Grandma told you?" "Grandma, I don't dare." "Why don't you dare? If you don't dare, how about you marry your eldest sister to the Lin family after you go back?" Xiang Lingling trembled when the word Lin family fell into her ears, and her face turned pale. "Grandma, please don't, I understand. This is the right thing. When things are done, you will be the crown prince's wife. What's wrong with that?" He smiled at the old lady, but his voice was full of coldness. Hunted his head towards Lingling and responded in a low voice. Sulayun also learned about what happened in Chaeyun Pavilion from Nanny Zhang. "I don't know what this old lady is trying to do." Grandma Zhang was amazed and couldn't help but sigh. Even if the Su family and the Sun family get back together, there will be no benefit to the Xiang family. If he really said it was for the good of the Sun family, Grandma Zhang wouldn't believe it. She was a maid personally selected and trained by Suleun's grandmother. She later followed Sun Gro, so she knew something about this old Mrs. Yang. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 335. Chapter 335, Find someone to test the poison. Suleun became a little more interested and asked, "Mommy, can you tell me about this great aunt?" If the young lady wants to hear it, the old slave can just say a few more words. Mama John closed the door as she spoke. Although what she wants to say is not something that cannot be said, after all, she is talking about someone else. This person is still the young lady's great aunt, so she needs to be more careful. The old slave was bought into the house by the old lady when he was 12 years old. At that time, the old lady had just given birth to the young lady, your uncle. In the early years, the Guan family was well known as a scholarly family. Then it gradually went downhill. By Suleun's grandmother's father's generation, the Guan family was completely lonely. But after all, they have a century-old foundation and a solid family background. Even if they are lonely, the Guan family still has a place in Yunqing. Sun Xiao was also from Yunqing. After joining the army, he returned to his hometown 1 year to visit his parents' graves and met his wife Guan Yuzhen. The Guan family all acquiesced in the relationship between the two, but there was only one person, Guan Yuzhen's sister, who did not agree with their marriage. As for the reason, Grandma Zhang couldn't tell. Later, Sun Xiao married Guan Yuzhen and moved to the capital. His contact with the Guan family was mostly through correspondence. The first time Nanny Zhang served in Guan Yuzhen's house, a letter happened to be delivered by the Guan family. It is said that Guan Yuzhen's sister will get married soon. Sun Xiao was away fighting, and Guan Yuzhen was in charge of the house. She also had to take her son and sister to get married. Naturally, she couldn't leave, so she had to carefully prepare gifts and have them sent back. What happened in the middle, Zhang Ye unknown, only knew that the person who gave gifts to the return of gifts brought a letter to Guan Yu really. After reading a letter, Guan Yu's face was visible to the naked eye. Later on, there were fewer letters from the Guan family, from one a month to one a year. Until the year Guan Yuzhen died, Sun Xiao rushed back to the capital to be with his wife. I also sent several letters home, but no one came to check on my family. The old lady always wants to go back to Yunqing, but she can't leave. Only those letters from home can make the old lady happy. Mammy Zhang's tone was low. Before the old lady left, she also said that she would ask the old general to send her back to Yunqing, but before the old lady returned, It turns out that my grandmother still had such a past. Suleun sighed. The stories of the older generation are quite complicated. Miss Lian Xian knocked on the door outside the house. Miss Yang is here. Suleun calmed down and said, "Invite her in." The door was pushed open and Xiang Lingling walked in. As soon as he met Xiang Lingling's eyes, Suleun noticed something strange. "Cousin," Xiang Lingling bit her lower lip and walked to Suleun, "I have something to say to you." Suleun was silent for a moment, then waved to Granny Zhang and Lian Xian to go down first. "What's the matter with you?" "Cousin, I didn't know that Grandma went to Tianbao Temple to see Mrs. Su." Xiang Lingling spoke sincerely and told Suleun what had happened. At the end, she said, "If I had known about it, I would never have come to call my cousin." Suleun stared into Xiang Lingling's eyes, then looked away, and said, "It has happened, let it pass." "Cousin, you didn't blame me." "What do I blame you for? Could it be that you asked my great-aunt to contact Mrs. Su?" Suleun smiled and seemed not to take this matter to heart. Xiang Lingling quickly shook her head and breathed a sigh of relief. "Of course not. Cousin, just don't blame me. Even for my cousin, you can also say something for me, okay? Brother won't care about this, so you don't have to think too much about it." That's good. Xiang Lingling seemed to have put down a heavy burden, and her expression became as bright as before. The palace of the Prince of Jin. Mr. Zhang checked Xiao Shenjiao again and nodded to Bai Rong. The effect of the medicine this time is better than the previous one. Is there a way to wake up the prince? Bai Rong asked further. Lao Zhang thought for a while, walked to the table, and revised the prescription again. It's just that it's not difficult to wake up, but it's hard to estimate what will happen after waking up. Mr. Zhang, what do you mean? Bai Rong didn't quite understand what Mr. Zhang said. Wouldn't it be a good thing to wake up? Mr. Zhang shook his head and said, we haven't fully understood this poison yet, and now we are taking it one step at a time. King Jin is lying down now, and the situation is under our control, but if he wakes up, how can we be sure that he won't it cause the toxin to spread faster? What should we do? Lao Zhang frowned and said for a while, if there is no other way, we can only find someone to test the poison. Test the poison. Bai Rong fell silent. He knew very well what the consequences of testing poison would be. Whether you want to do this or not is your business, I won't get involved. Lao Zhang said this, stood up and left. After a while, Lai Yifeng entered the house. What are the requirements for people who test poison? The meaning of his words is clear at a glance. Bai Rong looked at Lai Yifeng with a look of helplessness on his face. I will write down the requirements and choose. Don't worry, there are so many death row inmates in the prison that day, why should I look for others? Lai Yifeng paused. General Su will enter the palace today. When His Majesty knows about this, there is no need to worry about who will test the poison. I know. Bai Rong stood up. He was not a kind-hearted person. But since he started practicing medicine, his master had taught him that only with great love can he truly become a miracle doctor. He has always done this, but now that something happened to Xiao Shenjiao, this persistence will be abandoned by him. It would be great if the master was here. Bai Rong sighed in a low voice. In the afternoon, Suya entered the palace. On that day, everyone in the palace knew that General Suya had been ordered by Emperor Jianwen to be punished with 50 canes. The reason is that the errand in Yangzhou was not done well. But those who are interested feel that something is wrong. Suya walked back by himself, limping, and didn't feel embarrassed. Sulayun followed her brother. Suya wouldn't let her support him, so she could only follow. Seeing that he was about to arrive at Sun Mansion, Suya suddenly staggered. Sulayun hurriedly stepped forward to help him. Brother, please stop being so brave. She knew the whole story, but she couldn't talk about it. She could only support Suya hard to make him more comfortable. Don't tell me, the punishment of the rod in this palace is indeed lighter than that in the military camp. Suya still wanted to joke, so he rubbed the top of Sulayun's hair. Your brother is in good health, so don't worry. I'm not worried, but mother, what do you say? Sulayun hid the distress in his eyes and also joked along with Suya's words. Suya took a breath. Sister, will you help my brother later? If mother starts to cry, I can't help you. The brother and sister now agree that it is nothing if their mother curses others, but it would be very annoying if her mother started to cry. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 336. Chapter 336, Strange Village. As expected, as soon as the brother and sister reached the gate, they saw Sun Jiaro and Qin Zian approaching. Sun Jiaro was still holding on, but when she saw Suye's appearance, her eyes immediately turned red. Mom, don't cry. Before Sun Jiaro could cry, Suye gasped and stepped forward, trying to stop Sun Jiaro's tears. Sulayun was half a step behind and stood aside and said, Mom, brother is fine. Look at the way he is standing now. Don't worry. Are you hiding something from me again? Sun Gro did not cry, but her eyes fell on the two of them and asked. Suleun and Suya looked at each other and nodded without rebuttal. You two are really a family. Sun Gro originally felt sad, but when she saw the two people's reactions, she laughed out loud. Suya quickly continued, Mom, of course my sister and I are a family, and my mother, grandfather, uncle, and aunt are all a family. Yes, mother. Suleun should arrive. Seeing the antics of the two of them, Qin Zian couldn't help but said, Gro, both children are fine. Let Yeter go back and lie down first. It's not easy to recover from this injury. Sun Gro patted Suya on the shoulder, go back to the house, and Yunur, you should also go back and rest. You two brothers and sisters don't know what it means. If one is injured, the other will be injured as well. Could it be that the brothers and sisters share the joys and sorrows? I got it, mother. Suya and Suleun returned in unison. Afraid that Sun Gro would ask more questions, the two of them walked quickly and disappeared after a while. Tian Lao. There was silence all around. As the cell door was opened, there was a sudden noise in the cell. I was wronged. I want to see the emperor. Hun Jun. The cell was filled with constant noise. Everyone be quiet. The jailer knocked the wall, and his shouts echoed in the prison. Lai Yufeng walked inside. Most of the prisoners in the innermost room were death row prisoners, but the time was not up yet. Bai Rong, who was following behind him, frowned from time to time, finding it difficult to adapt to the scene in front of him. Sir, there are all death row prisoners here, let's see how you choose. The jailer was humble. This was an errand requested by the emperor, and of course he did not dare to neglect it. Lai Yufeng looked at Bai Rong, who nodded, stepped forward and took out a medicine bottle from his arms. Here are some pills, please let these prisoners take them. Bai Rong handed over the medicine bottle. These were the pills specially prepared by him and Mr. Zhang. Several jailers took one pill and fed it to the condemned prisoner. After a while, some of the condemned prisoners showed expressions of pain and their bodies huddled together, like steamed shrimps. Among the death row inmates, two of them had different reactions. One of them had neatly combed hair. After taking the medicine, his face turned pale and his hands and feet curled up, but he did not make a sound in pain. Another person was unresponsive and it seemed that the pills had no effect on him. Bai Rong walked into the cell, checked the pulses of the two men, and nodded to Lu Feng after a moment. Just these two people? Lu Feng responded, turned around, said a few words to the jailer, and then left with Bai Rong. After leaving the prison, Bai Rong slowly exhaled. I never thought there could be two people with such suitable physiques. Is just two people enough? Bai Rong and Lu Feng opened their mouths at the same time. Bai Rong replied, that's enough. With two people, the antidote should be made faster. That's good. Lai Yufeng didn't know much about this. Since Bai Rong said this, of course he believed him. The two death row prisoners were quietly sent to the Jin Palace. At night, Zhang Yang huddled in the haystack. The wound on his shoulder is now only bandaged hastily. Because he has not rested, the wound has not healed yet. A rustling sound came. Zhang Yang's face darkened. The cave he was hiding in was the same cave where Tuno stayed before. Could it be that King An's people found this place? It's just that he doesn't know the whereabouts of Grandpa yet. If he is caught, he will not be able to save Grandpa. Seeing the sound getting closer, Zhang Yang took the knife at his side with his uninjured other hand and rushed out without waiting for the opponent to get closer. It's me. Tano's voice sounded. With the moonlight, Zhang Yang could see Tano's face clearly. He was a little surprised, but he put down the knife in his hand. Why are you back? I heard that Mr. Zhang was taken away. When I went to your house again, I saw that there were guards around. I thought you might be here. Tuno looked John Yang up and down. There was another person standing behind him, his whole body covered in black, and even his face was wearing a mask. Almost instantly, John Yang's body tensed up. He could feel that the masked man was terrifyingly powerful. This is Mr. Shadow. Facing the masked man, Tuno looked very respectful. John Yang put away the knife. Do you know the whereabouts of my grandfather? Your grandpa is safe now. Ying's voice is a little hoarse, but you can tell that he is no longer young. How do you know? John Yang frowned and stared at Ying closely. Ying didn't answer him, but turned and left. Tanyo understood what Ying meant. Xiao Yang, it's not safe here either. Come with me. Lord Ying won't lie to you. John Yang pondered for a moment. He also knew that he would be discovered sooner or later if he was like this alone. But after leaving Tuno, he was alone. No matter what you choose, there seems to be no difference. In this case, John Yang nodded, I'll go with you. At the very least, their current opponents are the same. Riding a horse all the way east, passing through woods and valleys, about an hour later, a village appeared. At night, the lights in the village were still bright. Arrived in front of the village gate, Ying and Tuno both dismounted, and John Yang jumped down as well. The village door opened, and he followed the two of them and walked in. Occasionally, someone would cast their eyes on him. John Yang was secretly frightened. At a glance, almost all of the people in this village were martial arts practitioners. Even if I saw a few women, I could tell they knew some martial arts. He has lived in the suburbs of Beijing for so many years, but he didn't even know there was such a village here. By the time John Yang came to his senses, the shadow in front had disappeared, and only Tuno was standing in front of him. Xiao Yang, my brother, and the others are inside. Do you want to go in? It's natural. Come here, why don't you see the master? John Yang followed Tuno as he walked inside and could already smell the smell of medicine. He has often smelled the smell at home. Tuno opened the wooden curtain, and there were 5 people sitting or standing inside. Brother, I'm back. John Yang was attracted to the man in the main position at a glance. No one else could. This man exuded a kind of nobility that was hard to ignore. The man standing next to the man heard Tano's words and said, Where is Lord Shadow? On the way here, someone called Master Ying away. The man who spoke had some similarities with Tano in his eyebrows. He must be Tano's brother. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 337. Chapter 337 A piece of pastry. With Tano's introduction, John Yang knew the names of the people in front of him. Tano's brother is called Qiu Yi, and the man sitting on the main seat is called Fan Yu. Without even listening to their names, John Yang knew that the people in front of him were all foreigners as soon as he looked over. Let me take you to the room first. After Tano finished the introduction, he came to John Yang. Of course John Yang would not refuse, and he could see that these people should have something to say, but it was not suitable for him to listen. Following Tano out of the house, within a few steps, he arrived at the arranged room. The things inside are also very complete. Xiao Yang, if something happens to you, go to the 3rd room next to me and find me. Or if you see my brother and the others, you can tell them. Tano hesitated for a moment and continued, but this is my first time in this village, if nothing happens, you might as well not go out and walk around more. Seeing that Tano was about to leave, John Yang thought for a while and said, Tano, could you please help me check the whereabouts of Grandpa? Don't worry, I've asked my eldest brother and others to investigate Mr. Zhang's matter. Tano nodded and added, but Master Ying is very powerful. I think what he said may not be false. Mr. Zhang should be safe now. Sorry to bother you. Zhang Yang didn't say anything else. This was the first time he met Master Ying. He didn't trust him as much as Tino. But if Tino and the others really didn't help him find his grandfather, then he had no other choice. Now we can only place our hope on Tino. Xiang Lingling learned that Suye was injured and rushed over quickly. Suye had just changed out of his clothes and medicine. Before he could lie down, he learned that Xiang Lingling was coming, so he had to stand up to greet her. "Cousin, are you okay?" As soon as Xiang Lingling rushed in, she wanted to grab Suye, but she was dodged before her hands could touch her. "Cousin, it's better that you, a girl, don't come to my house so often. My injury is not serious, you can go back." I was just anxious." "Cousin, just be okay." Xiang Lingling withdrew her hand angrily. At this moment, she seemed to feel that she had become the Lu Shuiying before. The only thing that was better was that there were not so many people around to see her. "Then I'll go back first." He pursed his lips towards Lingling, glanced at Suye with some reluctance, and turned to leave. After Xiang Lingling left, Suye breathed out. After pouring the powder, the pain was much worse than before. But he didn't want others to see the joke, so he could only endure it. King Guo quickly closed the door and said, "Master, please go to bed and lie down." Although the 50 big slabs have some moisture in them, they are still 50 slabs, so it is impossible not to feel it at all. Fortunately, Suye's body was very strong, otherwise he would have lied down long ago. Early the next morning, the Sun Mansion was already bustling with activity. Several carriages were parked outside the gate, followed by many government soldiers. Jiang Susu followed her husband, watching the boxes being loaded onto the carriage one after another, and said quickly, "General, you don't need so many things." "Sister-in-law, don't be too little." Qin Zian laughed when she heard Jiang Susu's words. Sun Changping explained, "These things are not too much. They were all left by my mother before she passed away, saying they were for my daughter-in-law in the future. I used to send so much to my home." Qin Zian answered. Jiang Susu's heart was filled with joy of being valued. Today is the day for her to return home, and it is also the day for her to return to her hometown. Previously, she only sent a letter back and asked someone to inform Jiquengzia's parents about the matter. Today, Sun Changping accompanied her home and told her the matter in person in front of her parents' graves. Mrs. Yang and Xiang Lingling came from a short distance away. The expression on the former's face was not good looking. "You are so good, why did something happen at this time?" she whispered. Xiang Lingling breathed a sigh of relief. Suye originally wanted to accompany him, but now he was injured and could not travel far, so he sent additional soldiers to follow him. It takes 3 days to walk from the capital to Jiang Susu's hometown, and then from Jiang Susu's hometown to Yunchinj, which takes about 3 days. According to Mrs. Yang's idea, Xiang Lingling and Suye can be brought together in these 6 days. I just didn't expect this to happen. Mrs. Yang was so angry that she couldn't express her anger. "Grandma, maybe it was destined by God." Persuaded to Lingling. Xiang snorted to the old lady and suddenly stared at Xiang Lingling. "Really? I don't know for sure." For a moment, Xiang Lingling felt as if she was bitten by her grandmother's eyes. "Grandma, what do you mean?" Just when she asked Lingling, she suddenly let out a hiccup. She quickly covered her mouth, but once she started to hiccup, how could she stop it? Her eyes widened. Didn't she eat anything at all before? Except her grandmother gave her a piece of pastry. "Grandma, hiccup." Xiang Lingling realized something was wrong. She hiccuped much faster than before, almost making it impossible for her to finish a complete sentence. Even, she slowly felt that her breathing was a little difficult. Her face gradually turned blue. When Suleun came, he happened to see Xiang Lingling's face. "What happened?" She hurriedly stepped forward, looked at the old lady, and asked. Long before Sulayun came over, Mrs. Yang's expression had changed and she looked panicked. Lingling, don't scare grandma. What's wrong? Sun Gro also came over, saw Xiang Lingling's appearance, and quickly asked someone to come over and help. When Xiang Lingling was helped into the house, she could hardly breathe. This looks very much like an allergy. Sulayun took Xiang Lingling's pulse. The symptoms were like allergies, but the pulse was not right. Lingling. The old lady was still shouting from the side, her voice was sharp, which made people feel a little upset. Sulayun frowned and said, "Let everyone get out." She said, not caring much, and quickly opened Xiang Lingling's collar, only to see that red spots had begun to grow below Xiang Lingling's neck. There are signs of spreading downwards. Sun Gro supported Mrs. Yang and said, "Auntie, please go out first." The rest of the people also exited the room. Mrs. Yang stood outside the door and suddenly reacted, "Why don't you go and call the doctor quickly?" During the time she came, Sulayun had not been to Baikatang, so Mrs. Yang did not know that Sulayun had medical skills. She hadn't realized this before, but now that the person came out, she came back to her senses. "Auntie, Leun knows medical skills, and I've also sent someone to ask for a doctor." Sun Gro comforted her. She knows medical skills. Mrs. Yang felt something inexplicable in her heart. She felt that things might have changed. But she still muttered in her heart, Sulayun shouldn't be able to see anything, right? Xiang Lingling's illness would not have been diagnosed at once if she hadn't happened to meet a doctor who knew about it. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 338. Chapter 338. The first onset of illness. Inside the room, Sulayun and Lian Xian helped spread Xiang Lingling's hair. Lian Xian, go and boil hot water, the more the better, and have someone prepare barrels. Xiang Lingling had more and more red spots on her body, and her face was gradually covered with them. Sulayun had some guesses, it seemed to be purpura. There are many possible causes of purpura, but the symptoms are mostly the same. The hot water was quickly delivered, and Xiang Lingling was carried into the barrel. The heat was thickening, and the sound of her hiccups gradually faded away. "Miss, it seems to be working." Lian Xian noticed that Xiang Lingling's complexion also began to recover, and she was delighted. Sulayun came over to take a look. "We have to wait until she wakes up to see the situation. The doctor has also arrived." When he came in and took a look, he sighed. "Fortunately, Miss Su responded quickly. If I hadn't arrived by the time I arrived, I might have been too late." "Doctor, what is going on with my granddaughter?" Xiang entered the house and asked the old lady, pretending to be worried. In fact, she just wanted to see if Sulayun and the doctor had seen something wrong. The doctor looked at it for a moment, frowned and said, "These symptoms are somewhat familiar, but I can't remember them at the moment." Sulayun reminded, "Doctor, is this similar to purpura?" "Purple spot disease, yes, it is this purpura disease." The doctor's eyes lit up. He had been practicing medicine for many years, but he didn't expect that he didn't know as much as Sulayun. It's no wonder that shopkeeper Wang of Baikatang praised Miss Su so much. The old lady was surprised and looked at Sulayun. Does she really understand? Why did this disease attack suddenly, and, has Lingling ever had such a situation before? Sun Gro asked the doctor and Sulayun while looking at the old lady Xiang. He thought for a while and said, "Very few people get this purpura disease. Generally, if it does attack, if you don't respond in time, you won't be able to be saved at that time. I think this young lady must be suffering from the disease for the first time." Sulayun was thoughtful and said nothing. She had the same idea about what the doctor said, but she always felt a little strange. When Mrs. Yang heard what the doctor said, her eyes flashed with joy. When will Lingling wake up? It's hard to say. We can only let people wait and it will be fine when they wake up, but if there are some problems in the middle, such as fever and other symptoms, you need to be careful. As a result, Mrs. Xiang and Xiang Lingling will not be able to leave. Sun Changping and Zhang Susu learned about the situation and originally wanted to stay and leave later, but Sun Jiao and Qin Zian persuaded them, so they had no choice but to leave first. After all, Sun Changping left this time to return to the military camp. If he delayed for a few days and failed to get back in time, he would also be punished by the military. Worried that something had happened and the maids would not be able to react, Sulayun stayed behind to take care of Xiang Lingling. Mrs. Xiang sat in the room for most of the day, but she couldn't stay any longer. She complained about a headache and left. Sulayun frowned as he looked at the figure leaving the old lady. She felt strange when something happened to Xiang Lingling. Mrs. Xiang's reaction seemed to have been expected. Sulayun shook his head and continued to think about the method of applying acupuncture. The acupuncture technique taught to her by her master has a nice name, Liuxi 9 acupuncture. It is not just 9 sets of acupuncture, but 9 sets of acupuncture as a basis, and more acupuncture can be added to deal with more diseases. This is also the first time she has seen purpura. Taking medicine has little effect on this disease. Sulayun wanted to try Liuxiju needle to see if it could cure purpura. The night is getting darker. Lian Xian wiped Xiang Lingling's face and suddenly touched her cheek. Miss Xiang seems to have a fever. Let me take a look. Sulayun stepped forward and reached out to touch Lingling's forehead. Xiang Lingling's forehead was not hot, but the temperature on both sides of her cheeks was not right. When I reached down further, my ears were already red with heat. Bring the medicine you prepared earlier. Sulayun gave the order. Lian Xian acted quickly, and the medicine was prepared in the afternoon, just for this time. It was just that I had trouble taking the medicine. Perhaps I had hiccuped too frequently before, which hurt my throat. When I took a mouthful of medicine, most of it was spat out and I couldn't swallow it at all. After working on it for a long time, Lian Xian was sweating profusely. Sulayun thought for a while and said, "No need to feed him, just take a medicinal bath." Yes. The medicinal bath was quickly prepared. When the heat rose, Xiang Lingling sat in the medicinal bath bucket. Sulayun stood behind her and applied 5 needles on her back and shoulders. After a cup of tea, mist began to rise from the top of Lingling's head, and her face became more and more rosy. After waiting for half an hour, Lian Xian took Xiang Lingling out of the medicinal bath and dried her body. Touching my cheeks and ears again, they are no longer hot. Sulayun was woken up by a gust of cold wind. She rubbed the corners of her eyes. There was silence in the room, only soft breathing and the slightest sound of wind could be heard. The sound of gongs came from far outside the house. It was already midnight. She stood up and looked at Lian Xian, who had fallen asleep leaning on the table. Without waking up Lian Xian, Sulayun stepped forward to the edge of the bed and took Xiang Lingling's pulse. The red spots on Xiang Lingling's body had also faded a lot, and her condition seemed to have improved. Sulayun retracted her hand, and suddenly, a hand was placed on her. "Cousin," came Lingling's hoarse and weak voice. Sulayun looked down and Xiang Lingling didn't know when she opened her eyes. "How are you feeling?" Sulayun lowered his head and asked softly. "Is it night now?" "Well, it's already early morning." "Oh, no wonder it's so dark." Sulayun was stunned, black. She looked at the candle burning beside her. Although it was dim, it was not quite dark. Thinking about it, Sulayun stretched out his hand and waved it in front of Xiang Lingling's eyes. "Lingling, can you see me?" "Cousin, it's so dark, how could I possibly see it?" But Sulayun could completely see Xiang Lingling's appearance. She frowned and felt Xiang Lingling's pulse again. But just like before, there is no problem at all from the pulse condition. Cousin, what's wrong? It's okay, just sleep a little longer. Okay. Hunted to Lingling in a low voice, her breathing gradually calmed down. Soleun sat at the table with an ugly expression, and Lian Xin also woke up at this time. Miss, I accidentally fell asleep. Lian Xin quickly wiped the saliva from the corner of her mouth. Soleun waved her hand and asked her to speak softer. It's okay. You can rest. Lingling just woke up and she will be fine again. Miss, please take a rest soon. Soleun nodded and watched Lian Xin extinguish the candle. There was also a small bed arranged in the room. Soleun lay down undressed, thinking a lot. She realized that Xiang Lingling might be suffering from sequelae, but she knew too little about purpura, and she didn't know whether the eye disease was temporary or long-lasting. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 339. Chapter 339 Blindness. The next day. There was gradually a sound outside the courtyard. Soleun slowly opened her eyes. She hadn't fallen asleep much, thinking about Xiang Lingling. Lian Xin has also gotten up. Miss, I will prepare hot water for you first. Soleun nodded, got up from the bed, and looked at Xiang Lingling on the other side. I think I slept very comfortably, but I haven't gotten up yet. After washing his face and having breakfast, Soleun left the house when he saw that Xiang Lingling was not awake yet. Old Madame Xiang had also woken up and was coming out of the house, and the two of them happened to bump into each other. Grandma. How is Lingling? Asked to the old lady. She seemed worried about Xiang Lingling, but there was no worry in her eyes. Soleun's expression remained unchanged. Grandma, Lingling's condition has stabilized, but she may have some not so good symptoms. Not very good symptoms. Ms Yang didn't believe it. Is there something wrong with you? When she was in Yunqing, Xiang Lingling also had an attack. It was nothing at all. Why did something happen this time? Ms Yang didn't believe Soleun's words at all. She only said that she wanted to go in and see Lingling, but Soleun didn't stop her. When Sun Jiaro arrived, Xiang Lingling happened to wake up. Having learned from Soleun that Xiang Lingling might be blind, Sun Jiaro looked at Xiang Lingling, who woke up with a worried expression. Lingling. As soon as Ms Yang saw Xiang Lingling waking up, she quickly held her hand and shouted. Xiang Lingling was startled and thought about retracting her hand. Grandma, Grandma, have I slept for another day? Why is it still so dark outside? Lingling, what are you talking about? Xiang Madam looked out the window. The sun had fully risen. How could it be dark? Her hands trembled. It was such a tremor that Xiang Lingling noticed something. Xiang Lingling's face gradually turned pale. She stretched out her hand and touched her face, but she didn't touch anything. Grandma, don't joke with me, take off those black cloths quickly. Xiang Lingling's voice choked up. She groped for the darkness in front of her, opening and closing her eyes as if she could see the next moment. What the is going on? Ms Yang realized something was wrong and angrily questioned Soleun. Soleun said coldly, I told my aunt before, I'm afraid Lingling has left behind sequelae and is blind. Blind? Xiang Lingling screamed, how could it be? I can't see it. Impossible. How can I not see it? She struggled to get up and almost fell out, but was supported by Lian Xin. Miss Yang, please be careful. Cousin, I'm not blind, right? Are you mistaken? Tears flowed from the corners of Xiang Lingling's eyes. Soleun was about to step forward to comfort her, but was held back by Ms Yang. You have nothing to do with this matter. I'll tell you how you, a wild girl who came back from Jingzhou, Know any medical skills? Did you make a mistake yourself and want to blame Lingling's illness? The question to the old lady seemed sonorous and powerful, but when Suleun looked into her eyes, they were full of sternness. She clearly wanted to blame Suleun for Xiang Lingling's blindness. And, you have to think clearly before saying this. Sun Gro pulled Suleun behind her and looked at Mrs. Yang intently. Sun Gro will never take a step back when it comes to her children. She is just an aunt, why should she make baseless accusations against her children? You, this is talking back. Old Madame Xiang did not expect that Sun Gro would stand up and speak, and her body trembled slightly. Xiang Lingling didn't know why, but she gradually became quiet after hearing these words. She suddenly said, "Cousin, can you let them all go out, and you can stay with me, okay? Lingling, why do you still believe? Grandma." He shouted to Lingling, but his voice soon became weak again, "Please let me say a few words to my cousin." He pursed his lips to the old lady and said, "Lingling, no matter what happens, you have to remember that Grandma will always be here." Last sentence, Mrs. Yang's tone was particularly serious. He gritted his teeth towards Lingling and said, "I know." Soon, everyone else went out, leaving only Suleun and Xiang Lingling. "Cousin." Suleun walked to the bed and sat down. "Lingling, don't worry, maybe the blindness is only temporary." "Cousin, what's wrong with me?" Xiang Lingling did not mention the blindness, but asked about her illness. Suleun told her about purpura, and asked, "Purple spot disease is generally difficult to detect if there is no attack. Have you had an attack before?" He lowered his head to Lingling and said after a while, "I have no memory. This may be my first attack." She had no memory of this incident in her mind. She thought her grandmother had done it on purpose before, but if she had never had an attack before, maybe it had nothing to do with her grandmother? But why would Grandma say such things? Xiang Lingling thought about her grandmother's expression when she had an attack, and couldn't convince herself that the incident had nothing to do with her. "Cousin, I want to take a rest alone." "Okay, I'll go out first." Suleun covered Xiang Lingling with a quilt, turned around and left the house. Outside the house, when old Madame Xiang saw Suleun coming out, she quickly stepped forward and said, "I want to go in and see Lingling." Suleun turned sideways and said, "Lingling said she wanted to be alone for a while. I am her grandmother, can't I go in?" Mrs. Yang didn't listen to Suleun's words and pushed the door straight in. Suleun did not stop him and walked to Sun Gro. "Yunur, Lingling's eyes are really invisible. It's still unclear what the cause is. I've asked Quiliu to ask shopkeeper Wang. Maybe he knows more." Suleun returned. Sun Gro sighed, "This child Lingling is really pitiful. Even if she has purple spot disease, why is she still blind? Purpura is a disease that is 1 in a million unexpectedly, it can also cause blindness. This is indeed too tragic." "Grandma!" Suddenly, Xiang Lingling's screams came from inside the house. The maids ran in and took a look, and found that Mrs. Xiang had fainted. Xiang Lingling was at a loss. She could not see anything and had no idea what was happening. She only heard something hit the ground and she shouted. Mrs. Xiang was helped out by the maids, her face looked very ugly. Suleun stepped forward, wanting to feel Mrs. Xiang's pulse and check the situation, but was stopped by the nanny who was personally serving Mrs. Xiang. "Miss Leun, the old lady probably fainted because she was overthinking for a moment. It's okay. The slaves will take care of her. You'd better go and see Miss Yang first." Suleun was pushed out of the room directly. She raised her eyebrows. Although Mrs. Yang's face didn't look very good, her eyelids were still moving and she didn't look like she had fainted. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 340. Chapter 340 Speaking Attitude. Sulayun entered the room again. Xiang Lingling's face was already pale, but when she was frightened by Mrs. Xiang, it became even more pale. "How is Grandma?" Xiang Lingling couldn't see anything, so she could only stretch out her hand and fumble helplessly. "Grandma is fine." Hearing Sulayun's voice, he unconsciously showed a bitter smile to Lingling, and quickly covered it up. Before coming to the capital, she was often jealous of her other sisters because she was chosen by her grandmother to come to the capital. But when she came to the capital and saw the prosperity, she felt more and more embarrassed. Once that feeling came to her heart, Xiang Lingling could only cover it up with the brightest smile. She had thought that the cousin who came back from Jingzhou would have the same low self-esteem as she did, but she didn't at all. In Sulayun, all she could see was transparency and open-mindedness. Holded his head to Lingling, not knowing what to say. "You should have a good rest first and don't worry about other things." Sulayun couldn't tell what Xiang Lingling was thinking at this time, so he said a few words of relief. If Mrs. Xiang is so confused, she probably won't bother Xiang Lingling anymore. Chaeyun Pavilion had been busy for a long time and finally stopped. After lunch, shopkeeper Wang came. Sulayun took shopkeeper Wang to Chaeyun Pavilion to show Xiang Lingling the situation. During this period, Baikatang was still closed. Except for shopkeeper Wang, the other doctors did not know that Mr. Zhang had been rescued. After all, one less person knows about this, and there is one less risk. In the room, Xiang Lingling was sitting at the table. She did not let the maid serve her, but insisted that she could eat normally. But the food falling on the table and the dirt on her clothes all showed how difficult it was to eat this meal. When Sulayun walked in, Xiang Lingling was picking up a piece of meat and putting it in her mouth. Seeing her actions, Sulayun didn't make a sound. This piece of meat entered Xiang Lingling's mouth with difficulty. She closed her mouth and chewed, her big eyes open blankly. Miss Layun is here." The maid gave a reminder at Sulayun's signal. Xiang Lingling had already swallowed the food in her mouth. When she heard the maid's voice, her movements froze slightly, and then she put down her chopsticks. "Cousin is here. Come in and sit down." She was a little at a loss and wanted to get up, but Sulayun held her down. "Are you full?" Sulayun spoke in the same tone as before, which slightly calmed Xiang Lingling's mood. She pursed her lips and smiled at Lingling, but her smile was no longer the same as before. "I am full." Seeing that she was not lying, Sulayun asked the maid to remove the things from the table. The maids were clearing the table, and Sulayun said softly, "The divine Dr. Wang who I told you about before is outside right now. Can I ask him to come in and take a look at you?" "Good." Xiang Lingling's eyes were empty, but her slightly trembling fingers expressed her nervousness and expectation. Physician Wang entered the room and said in a gentle tone, "Miss Xiang, if you feel uncomfortable during the examination, please tell me, okay?" He nodded slightly to Lingling. Physician Wang first checked Xiang Lingling's pulse, and then asked someone to take a lit candle and place it in front of Xiang Lingling's eyes and shake it from side to side. Xiang Lingling couldn't help but shrink back when the heat from the candle came, but she stopped again when she thought of what divine Dr. Wang had said before. She spoke cautiously, "Mr. Wang, what is this?" Because she couldn't see, Xiang Lingling could only feel the heat of the candle flame, but couldn't see the rest. She guessed that it must be something like fire, but she didn't know why Dr. Wang would bring such a thing to her. "It's a candle." Divine Dr. Wang stared closely at Xiang Lingling's eyes. When the flame came closer, Xiang Lingling's eyes did not change at all, and her pupils did not shrink like normal people. Obviously, she had no perception of the intensity of these lights. Physician Wang put down the candle and motioned to Lingling to close her eyes. After Xiang Lingling closed her eyes tightly, Dr. Wang raised his hand and pressed one of her eyelids with his thumb. Before Dr. Wang could take action, A shout came from behind. What are you going to do to Lingling? Sulayun turned around and saw that it was none other than Mrs. Yang. Hurrying into the old lady, she was about to pull Dr. Wang away. Grandma, Dr. Wang is treating Lingling. What kind of miracle doctor is there? Don't be the one you invited to scare people. When Mrs. Yang heard the word miraculous doctor, her eyes turned uneasily. Go away quickly, don't think about doing anything to Lingling again. Grandma, do you mean to let Lingling remain blind like this? Sulayun came from a high background, so her tone was very cold, but Mrs. Yang didn't feel it. Hunted loudly to the old lady, don't think that I don't know your thoughts. Since Lingling's trouble happened in your home, you must be responsible to the end. So am I not responsible? Sulayun's voice had a sarcastic smile. Since she is her grandmother's sister, everyone in the Sun family takes good care of her, but it does not mean that she can boss around in the Sun family. Is this the way you talk to me? Old Madame Xiang heard the sarcasm in Sulayun's words and frowned, as if she didn't believe what she heard. Sulayun tilted his head. My aunt doesn't understand what I mean, so I'll be direct. If you can't cure Lingling's disease, don't stop us from treating Lingling. Now, Grandma, please go out first. Behind him, Kuliu and Liangzin stepped forward and respectfully invited the old lady out. Mrs. Yang was extremely angry, but she also knew that she was in the Sun Mansion and couldn't yell. She endured it again and again, but she still couldn't hold it back. She turned around and left the yard, not knowing where she was going. Physician Wan continued to examine Xiang Lingling. The latter's body was a little stiff and she was sitting in her seat. She is blind now, but she can feel better who treats her well. Miss Yang, if you feel uncomfortable, please tell me. After saying this, Divine Dr. Wang began to use force with his hands, moving back and forth on Xiang Lingling's eyelids. Gradually, my eyelids became warm. This kind of warmth is different from covering it with a cloth soaked in hot water. Xiang Lingling felt that the dark scene in front of her eyes had a touch of white. I think I can see it. She made a sound of surprise. Physician Wang put down his hands and hurriedly opened her eyes to Lingling, but in fact, she still couldn't see anything. The white color just now seemed to be her dream. Seeing Xiang Lingling's reaction, Dr. Wang knew what was going on and nodded to Sulayun. Sulayun stepped forward and said, Lingling, Divine Dr. Wang and I will go out for a while. You wait for us to come back. Cousin, just tell me directly. He stretched out his hand to Lingling anxiously and groped for a while, grabbing someone's sleeve. Seeing this, Sulayun sighed and looked at Divine Dr. Wang. Dr. Wang, please just tell me about this. End of this chapter.